Hi everyone, and welcome back to Grandpa's School of Hot Rod Building. In this episode, we're going to join the body to the chassis. It basically involves lining it up forward to backwards, then the back end left to right, then the front end left to right. Then you put the hood on and position it to make sure that it's all square. And if it's good, you go ahead and you bolt it down. Before doing the body joint, I needed unencumbered access to the trunk, which means I have to have the trunk lid up or off. Now I've got to install these gas springs at some point anyway, so I just went ahead and made that kind of my first task. It's not difficult if you understand vector analysis and trigonometry. Now some of you guys out there, that's not your skill set. You got other skills, good skills as well, but so to make it easy, I put the part number and the source down in the description below. But you know you've done a good job of engineering your gas spring shocks, that when you pop open the trunk, it comes open about halfway or so all by itself, like that. Then, you know, just a finger and you raise it the rest of the way up and there it is. The general strategy of securing the body to the chassis is to first line it up in this axis, forward to backwards. That's the most difficult because you're moving the entire body rather than just, you know, twisting it. And to know that I was forward or backwards, you know, where I was in reference to the wheels, that's the important part, is that, you know, the tire, you know, the wheel is lined up with the openings in the fenders. So I drew this line on the axle, you know, right with the axis of the car. And I also drew a corresponding mark on the fender, which I temporarily installed in place. And and rather than to permanently install, I did it temporarily. And that's because I need this space over here to line the body up left and right. This panel here, this is the wheel tubs, and they line up perfectly with the outside of the chassis, left and right. So when you got the wheel tubs lined up, you know you got the body straight at the back end. Now later I'll be building, fabricating, and installing some brackets for the bumpers. And I like to have access for that. So when I get the bumpers installed, then I'll work on, I should say the bumper bracket installed, then I'll work on the fender installation. Now, before the body arrived, I had the good sense to drill the holes in the chassis cross member here and here. And then when the body arrived and I got it in position, I was just able to drill the holes in the fiberglass and, you know, through spot holes, and then widen them out to where they line up and bolt it on. You temporarily, when you put the bolts on, like anything else you assemble, you put the bolts in place, but you don't tighten until you've got everything lined up. And I'm as far forward as I can be on the body. And it'd be nice to be probably forward another ½ inch, but that's okay. Everything worked out. The reason I spaced my holes here is because right in here under this panel is the gas tank. And I wanted to be able to reach up under there and tighten up the bolts. If I'd have put them in the center here, I would not have been able to access the bolts very well to tighten everything because of the gas tank's interference. Anyway, it worked out really good, and I'm very pleased at how it all bolted together back here. Okay, under the car, let's get this right. Under the car, you will see there's this flange. This is a piece that well, I'll show you when you get back up top. Anyway, this is part of the tilt front assembly that remains stationary on the body so that the sides of the tilt front don't scrape the body when you tilt it up and retract it. Anyway, I got up my calipers to align the front end And I made sure the distance from this piece back in here behind that flange and the chassis were the same left and right. Those flanges that this member attaches to is very, very close to symmetric on left and right sides. And so I presumed that that's about as accurate as we're going to get. I made shims with some stock thin pieces of metal, and of course, shim stock that you use in carpentry. And between those pieces of metal and wood that I had, I got the same gauge thickness on both sides and was able to use that as a check fit to make sure that I had the body lined up left and right the same. My drill points, or my mounting points in the car, I'm using, this is as far forward, here's the outside of the door, here's the firewall. This is as far forward as I can go here on the chassis, because even though the floor of the car is flat, at this point the chassis starts to drop down. And it's pretty well flat, the chassis that is, as well as the floor, back a little bit beyond here. And then the body of the Willys goes up, ramps up, and shortly behind that the chassis ramps up. Now, looking at it right off, you're probably saying, well, gee, that's just a few inches there. And this is way off here, quite a bit further in from the door. And it looks a little unsettling at first, but believe me, the chassis is running straight, the body curves. You're very tight up here by where your feet go. You got plenty of room back here where your rump is. This is the bolt under the chassis. 6 inches, a 6-inch bolt would come down to about the bottom of the chassis. It wasn't long enough. 7 inches would be ideal. The hardware store only had 8-inch bolts. So I bought the 8-inch bolt, and the threads only came to there, so I had to use this large nut I had for a spacer. And I could probably cut the threads off here with my cut-off saw, or I could fix a hook on there and catch some roadkill for supper. In Scott's chassis prep guide, he mentions he recommends that this chassis horn be cut about 1 inch forward of the steering box. When I did that, I was bumping onto the body here really close. I didn't like that, so I went ahead and cut it back a little bit more. And now about a finger's distance forward of it, and I tapered at an angle. It sort of angles with the body. And then I'll be putting a bracket down here with a mounting flange. I should say a plate with a mounting flange on it. And this is the bracket here that actually goes, it orientates like this. And it sits back inside on the other side. This is of this structural rib here. There's this rib that goes all the way up to the top of the fender and all the way down to the bottom of the front body. And it'll mount on the other side. Now, if you go on YouTube and you see Zach, that's Scott's son, installing his tilt front, he has a different chassis. He has a custom chassis, and there's space between his chassis and this rib to put the bracket. And but on my car, on this car with the S10 chassis, you have to mount the bracket on the outside of this member here. Now I'm gonna lie back. I'm gonna show you what I did here. I had to come in and put a mark on there where I want to make a cut. So I got to take the hood off, put it back over on my work table, and cut this back here and down here, so the plate with the mounting flange will mount on this section of the chassis, and the bracket that Scott Rod shipped me will mount. I'll drill a few holes in this flange and mount to this great big structure. That's a good hard structure in there. I believe he's got a hardwood covered with fiberglass. We'll see when I start drilling into it. Yeah. Now you'll notice fiberglass is pretty flexible. It's thicker gauge than sheet metal steel. They usually shape car bodies with, but it's flexible, much more flexible. And at highway speeds, you know, the way this is, it's just the nature of everything. It's gonna, if I don't brace it under here, put some braces under this hood somehow, this thing is gonna flap in the wind like a wet dog. Okay, well, in the next episode, we're going to go over aligning the front hood and installing the brackets that we can tilt. And that'll be lots of fun. I'm really looking forward to getting this hood into the position where it can tilt.